Okay, I'm going to answer the questions here to the study guide. Let me start here with a graph. Y equals 3x minus 1. So this one is already in y equals mx plus b form. Okay, so what that's telling you right away is where to start your graph at -1. So we're going to start here at -1. Okay, and our slope is 3, which is also 3 over 1. Okay, that's what the slope is, because it's already in y equals mx plus b. So it tells us where to start, and it tells us our slope. So that means that every time I go 1 over, I go 3 up. So 1 over, and then I go 1, 2, 3 up. Okay, and then also, because this is a positive slope, you can make them both negative, and that's still a positive slope, because a negative divided by a negative is positive. So that means every time I go, and just so you know, the thing is that you keep in mind is the slope is going to go in the same direction. So, you've already got it going up here, like it's going up. So as it goes on the other side, it's going to keep going down this way. So keep that in mind. So that means if I go -1 over, I go 3 down. Okay. And so there's my graph. Okay. Number 2 is almost in y equals mx plus b form. So we'll start with the equation here. And we've got to put it in y equals mx plus b. So we're going to move the x, have it cut in line. Okay, so this one is -2x plus 5. So this one here, we put it in y equals mx plus b. Now we're going to graph it. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to start up here. Okay, that's because that's the y-intercept. And then our slope is -2, which we'll start with -2 over 1. Okay, because that's a -2. So that means every time we go 1 over positive, we go 2 down. And also a thing to check is if the slope is positive, which in this case it was, okay, the line should go up. In this case, the slope is negative, so the line should go down. So we've got our point on this side of the y-intercept. Now we need to put our point over on the other side, which, should be somewhere out here somewhere. And so that same slope can be where the negative is on bottom. This is still a -2. So that means that I go 1 over negative, and I go 2 up. Okay. So there's that graph. Number 3. Okay, there's a couple other things we got to do to put it in y equals mx plus b form. So we've got to move the 4x over. Okay, I just had it cut in line. And then I got to get rid of this 2. Make sure you divide both things by it. Okay, so I divided the 4x and I divided the 6. So now I'm in y equals mx plus b form. And we're going to start at 3. Okay, because that's where it's telling me positive 3 is where I start. The slope is a positive 2 again. So every time I go 1 over, I go 2 up. Okay. So 1 over, I go 2 up. And then the other way to write that positive slope is 1 over 2 down. Okay. And let's see if I've got enough room. Probably right here. So number 4 was 2x minus 2y equals 4. So once again, we got to have the x cut in line. Now don't forget that the y is negative on this one. See, when I move this one, the y was positive. When I move this one, the y is still negative. Okay, so I move it. Okay. Then I divide by -2. And what happens is, those cancel out. This becomes a positive 1x. Okay, if you have a 1 there, that's fine. But see, a negative divided by negative. But this is a positive divided by a negative, so it's -2. So, the first part of the battle is to make sure you get your equation right. So this one's going to start at -2. Now, when I grade these, I do partial credit. So, let's say you had done this and you had missed this part of it and you started at the wrong spot. Don't necessarily feel like you missed the whole problem, because then at that point, I'm going to check and see if you did your graph right off your wrong equation. Okay, so I'm checking several things. I'm checking, did you do this part right? Then based off this answer, did you graph right? And so I'm taking all that into consideration. So continue with the problem no matter what. Make sure you're graphing, what you have, but just be real careful with your negatives and positives through here, because it does affect it. So in this case, we start at -2. Our slope is 1 over 1, okay, because it's a 1. So that means if I go 1 over, I go 1 up. Okay, 1 over, 1 up. It's still here. And then also I can make these both negative, and it's still a positive 1, which means I go 1 over, 1 down. Okay, so there's my line. All right, a couple more to graph. Let's see. Number 5 was 2x plus 3y equals -3. I put one on here like this, that, okay, you move the x, you still do that. You have a positive y left. You've got a -2x that cuts in line in front of the -3. You're going to divide by 3. So everything's the same so far. The only difference is this one does not come out even, but it's okay because our slope is going to be a fraction a lot of times. So we have -2/3 x. Okay. Now, I'm going to put this negative, it's out front. The whole thing is -2/3, and that's going to come in here in a second. Then this is going to be a -1. Okay, -3 divided by 3 is -1. So let's start our graph at -1. Okay, so our graph starts here at -1. And the first, so if I have a -2/3 slope, okay, the first rendering of that is -2 over 3. So that means I go 3 positive, and I go 2 down. Okay, because the run is +3, and I go 2 down. The other rendering of that is to go 3 negative and 2 up. Okay, so here's my line. Okay, so that's what a -2/3 slope is. Either -2 over 3 or 2 over -3. And that's graphing both of them from the starting point. Okay, last one to graph. This one's so small it can be kind of tricky, but we're going to move the x. Okay, so I move the x, cut in line, and then don't leave this negative, but move the negative over here. Now, you're dividing the whole thing by -1 and the whole thing by -1. So when that happens, this is going to become a -x, and this is going to become a -2. You got to change the sign on both of them. Okay, so that means, that changes the starting spot. That means we're going to start at -2 instead of +2. And then my slope is -1, which could be written like this, or it could be written like this. And we're going to graph both of these. Okay, so the first one is if I go over +1. So if I go over +1, run +1, I'm going to go down 1 for rise. And then this one is, if I go -1 for run, I'm going to go up 1 for rise. So here's my slope. Okay, you don't need the arrows, but just so you see, that's my slope there. All right, so that is graphing the equations. Then I had you find the x-intercept and y-intercept. So here's the first one that I had you do. The y-intercept is given to you on this one. It's right here. It's 4. Okay, but the x-intercept, you're going to have to solve for x by plugging in 0 for y. So, it's given to you on this one. Y-intercept is right here. It's in y-intercept form. That's your b. That's your y-intercept. You just got to put it there. Then to find the x-intercept, we're going to plug in 0 for y and solve for x. Oh, sorry, and I wanted you to write these as if x is 0, then y is 4. That's the y-intercept point. Okay, so this one also is going to have an x and y. And so this one's going to be when y is 0, what point do we get for x? Okay, so let's go through that. So we're going to solve. We're going to move the 4 over. And then we're going to divide by 4. And our x is -1 then. Okay, so here's my y-intercept. Here's my x-intercept. Okay, let's do number 8. This one, we got a few things we got to do. So even our y-intercept, we're going to have to do something. So we're trying to find our y-intercept, which when x is 0, what's going to be my y? Okay. So to do that, we need to get rid of this 3, which makes this positive x, 1x, and this is going to make this -2. -6 divided by 3 is -2. So my y-intercept is -2, 0, -2. Now, using this same equation, I like to use it after I do all this because it's just simple, is now we need to solve for our x-intercept. When our y is 0, what is going to be my x? So we're going to plug in 0 for y and solve for x. So all we need to do is move the 2 over, and 2 is x. So 0, -2 for y-intercept, 2, 0 for x-intercept. Okay, number 9. Another one so small it can be kind of tricky. So we need our y-intercept, we need our x-intercept, and I think I did these out of order. It's just, how yes, I did, because, hope I didn't make you dizzy there. Oh, and I did it again. And again, I got to stop. If it doesn't matter, like I wrote these this way, make sure you fill it in so I know which one you're talking about. But really, we're solving for the y-intercept first. So that's why over here, when I'm working them, I switched them. So, just make sure you mark which ones are which. So this one, when the x is 0, what is the y? And this one, when the y is 0, what is the x, basically. So let's find the y-intercept first. So what we need to do is put this in y equals mx plus b form. So we need to move the x over. And that's still a -y. Okay, and that cut in line here. And then we're going to drop or divide by -1 is what we're doing. So that's going to change this to a positive x. It's going to change this to a -7. Okay, make sure you change, because you're dividing the whole thing by -1. So that cancels those negatives. This cancels those negatives, but it makes that one negative. So that means my y-intercept is -7, 0, -7. And my x-intercept now, I'm going to plug in 0 for y and solve for x. So all we need to do is move the 7 over, and 7 is x. So 0, -7 for y-intercept, 7, 0 for x-intercept. All right, last one, number 10, 6x plus 2y equals 4. So we need our y-intercept and our x-intercept. Okay, we're filling in that. And over here, we're filling in that. Okay, so move the x. Have it cut in line. Divide by 2. This is going to be -3x. This is going to be 2. Okay. Oh, I already see a issue that's going to come up with this one. That's fine. It's okay. It still can be solved. I don't think I put one on your test that ends up like this, but we'll see. But basically, okay, so now I can solve for my y-intercept. It's 2. To solve for x, let's put in 0 for y. Okay, now we're going to move the 2 over. Okay, this is a negative 3x still. And then we're going to divide by negative 3. Now, the thing that happens here is this is going to stay a fraction. They're going to become positive, though, because they're both negative. And so that's your x-intercept is 2/3. That's where it crosses, is at 2/3. So if you end up with one that doesn't come out even for the x-intercept, that's okay. You can put it here. It's still a fraction. I think they all come out even on the test, but just in case, that's what happens. Is, you know, you divide by 3, you divide by 3. That's not going to come out to like an even number, so we're going to leave it. But it does become positive because these are both negative. Okay. The last question is, on this formula, I asked you what letter is slope. So slope is m. Okay, that's the slope. And then the y-intercept is b. So make sure you get those. Okay. All right. And I know I kind of, what you'd say went kind of quick, but you can, you know, look at each one individually. But that way you can check your study guide. And I'm going to post these together so that you can have an extra day to look at these. Okay. Thanks, guys.